have forgotten that we exist as people. The old doesn't work anymore. These are all new normals. And we were like, what are we doing with our lives?
Welcome to the show Real and Real Characters. Mahitha's life has followed an I go where my heart takes me path. She became an etiquette trainer after someone saw her children use their cutlery perfectly. She got involved with theatre after a director saw her hanging around her children's theatre workshops and invited her to be part of his upcoming project. She went on to be a part of several plays with the Madras Players and Kriya Shakti till, on a whim, she left Chennai for Bombay to go to drama school. There, a role in Sacred Games came to her with a phone call saying, "Come audition." She wrote a piece about her mother, grumbling that they hadn't figured out how to get along with each other, and that led her to a performance at Spoken 2020, Asia's largest spoken word festival. Mahitha spent her summers in a village in Tamil Nadu, lying on a swing in the courtyard of her ancestral home, listening to her grandmother tell stories. Today, a grandmother herself, she will tell you life's good, and she will tell stories to anyone who will listen. Welcome to Real and Real Characters, Mahitha. It's lovely to have you here. Tell me, what is the movie that has inspired you?
Thank you, Raji, for reaching out and inviting me to be on your show. It's completely my pleasure to be here. English Vinglish, Sridevi's comeback movie. Yeah, that is the one that I'd like to talk about today.
English Vinglish is a 2012 Indian comedy drama film that revolves around a woman named Sashi, a small entrepreneur who makes snacks. Sashi enrolls in an English-speaking course to stop her husband and daughter mocking her lack of English skills and gains self-respect in the process. Written and directed by Gauri Shinde, Sridevi's character was inspired by Shinde's mother, a Marathi-speaking woman who ran a pickle business at her house in Pune. Her mother was not fluent in English, which embarrassed Shinde as a child. In an interview, Shinde said, "I made this film to say sorry to my mother." The film marked Sridevi's return to film acting after a 15-year hiatus. It features Adil Hussain, French actor Mehdi Nebu, Priya Anand, Sujata Kumar and Sulabha Deshpande. Amitabh Bachchan and Ajit Kumar had cameo appearances in the Hindi and Tamil versions respectively. The soundtrack and background music were composed by Amit Trivedi and the lyrics were by Swanand Kirkire for the Hindi version. Cinematography was by Lakshman Utekar and the film was edited by Hemanti Sarkar. The film was produced by Sunil Lalla, R. Balki, who is Gauri's husband, Rakesh Junjunwala and R.K. Damani under Hope Productions. English Vinglish premiered at the 2012 Toronto International Film Festival, where it received a 5-minute standing ovation. The film received widespread critical acclaim and was a major financial success. It won all of the Best Debut Director Awards of 2012 for Gauri Shinde. It was shortlisted as India's official entry for the Academy Awards in the Best Foreign Language Film category. The film earned global acclaim at several international festivals, and Sridevi was hailed as the Meryl Streep of India and the female Rajnikant in India. Which is the character in the movie that has inspired you and why?
I think it is the main character herself, Sridevi, in the movie. More than that, I think it was a story as a character that inspired me. And the way that other people reacted or responded to the story. So when I was talking to women of my generation, I found that there was a similar reaction in practically every single one of them. They were crying and we were like, what are we doing with our lives? We saw that movie and we were able to relate to the situation. It's not that, everybody had a mildly abusive husband.
Jazz dance. என்னோட பேசுறது இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் இல்லைல்ல.
அடா அது அமெரிக்கா, இட்ஸ் a foreign land. உனக்கு இங்கிலீஷ் கூட சரியா தெரியாது.
என்னன்னு கூப்பிடுறாங்க தெரியுமா? ஆந்திரப்ரனர்.
ஓ மை காட், அங்கேயும் எல்லாருக்கும் லட்டு கொடுத்துட்டியா? ஆந்திரப்ரனர்.
children who didn't respect them.
நானும் அதை படிக்கல.
படிக்க தெரிஞ்சாதானே. Okay, bye. நீ அவரை எவ்வளோ அன்கம்ஃபர்டபுளா ஃபீல் பண்ண வச்ச தமிழ்ல பேசி. சப்னா நல்ல பொண்ணா, எல்லாருக்கும் அவ்வளோ பிடிச்சிருக்கா. காட், அப்புறம் அந்த கேஃபே காஃபி டே ஜோக் அடிக்க வேண்டிய அவசியம் என்ன உனக்கு இப்போ? அப்பா வந்திருக்கணும். அப்புறம் அந்த ரூபா இங்கிலீஷ்ல பேசுறேன். எல்லாருக்கும் அவங்களுக்கு நான் தான் பதில் சொல்றேன்.
We have forgotten that we exist as people with a right to a life of our own. And we only now have an identity as somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, somebody's mother. There was regret. People say, when you're a mother, you need to sacrifice, you need to be a mother first and foremost. But ask the mothers, everyone enjoys that role, everyone lives that role. But I'm not sure how many people want to be just that, forgetting who they are. This movie was a mirror held up to a lot of us that showed us what we had done with our lives. And I don't think many people were happy to be faced with the reflection of what they had become. A lot of men reacted by saying, we never realized that casual words we spoke could have such an impact on somebody. We didn't realize that little things that we take for granted could actually make a big difference in someone else's life.
So, what was it about the main character that you could resonate with?
It was not about her learning English and becoming empowered. It was about the fact that she was worthy as a person, but she didn't recognize it because she pegged her worthiness to somebody else's standard, to the standard of her daughter, who expected that her mother should know English to be considered worthy of her respect.
நீ சொல்லி தரியா இங்கிலீஷ் லிட்ரேச்சர்?
She pegged her sense of self-esteem to her husband's, which subtly made it clear that just being a homemaker, just knowing how to cook was not enough.
I have no quiz competition. நான் போறேன் அம்மாவோட. ஜாலியா?
அம்மாவோட போ, ஸ்கூல்ல இருந்து தூக்கிடுவாங்க. உட்கார்ந்து லட்டு பண்ண வேண்டியதான்.
That interaction where she sees her husband with an office colleague, she realizes that her family and the world looks at her as being worthy only if she has a particular skill, and she also started believing that.
அப்ப நான் நல்லா சமைக்கலனா நீங்க வீட்டுக்கே வர மாட்டீங்கல?
I may think that because I am only a storyteller today and I am not a Bollywood or a Tamil movie actor, maybe my sense of worth is not enough. But that is not true. As long as I believe that what I'm doing has some worth, then I am a person who is worthy, right? That was the thing. It was about her figuring out that she did not have to peg her self-esteem to somebody else's measure. She needed to believe. There's that point, no, where she tells another character,
Thank you for making me feel good about myself.
only if she felt good about herself, somebody else would treat her with respect. Otherwise, it was not going to happen.
What do you think made her realize that self-worth in herself?
It's not like she was a weak woman. She was a strong woman. She was not this clinging vine that was dependent on somebody else. No, when her husband said he couldn't do something for her, she went out and did it for herself. She believed that she was less because she couldn't do something that society believed was good. Now she was thrown into an unfamiliar milieu where others were also judging her and sort of humiliating her for the same thing.
And what kind of filling do you want inside? Do you want cheese, tomatoes, lettuce?
Huh?
Lady, do you see you are holding up my line? This is not rocket science. Cheese?
Cheese.
Yes to cheese.
And I think finally something snapped and she was like, enough, I don't want to be hurt by this anymore. I realize my situation is not ideal. Maybe I could do something to change it. And she did it. I told you when we went out as friends, a lot of people were upset. They were crying. They were like, my situation is so bad, it is so sad. But how many of them today, after all these years, are still in that same situation? Most. And I'm not saying you need to walk out of a marriage to make it better. No. There are little things you can do to make it better. But it's difficult. It's uncomfortable. You have to get out of your comfort zone. It takes a lot of strength.
Even so-called privileged women, what makes them get into that situation of lacking self-worth?
Even for people like us who have a good education, we were brought up by mothers from a different generation where the lives were very different, the values were very different. So being a good woman was equated to a large extent with being a good family woman. That was the box. So you were a good mother, you were a good wife, you were good in culturally, socially accepted norms. So if you fit into all those descriptions, you were okay. And very often, these norms are not meant to encourage you to bloom as a person. They're meant to make you adjust and fit into a little box that serves other people's needs, not your needs. All of us have needs, emotional needs, all sorts of things. And when we are not fulfilled in those, we don't believe that we are worthy. And so we try to be the best mom, the best wife, the best social everything, and we forget about ourselves.
We outgrow those roles, and because of which we are left high and dry kind of situation.
Yes, that is when we start questioning ourselves, thinking, my children don't need me anymore. My mother-in-law doesn't need me anymore. My husband has a full life. So what am I? Have I even had a chance to find out who I am? If I don't even know who I am, how do I live a life that fulfills me in any way? Around this time of the English Vinglish movie time, my children were grown up. One was in college, one was just leaving to go to college. They didn't need me anymore. And I didn't know what to do with myself because I only knew how to be a mother. And I only knew how to be a wife to a man who even lived in a different city. So what was I without traditional family?
Right.
So this was a mirror, and that is when you start feeling insecure. And if you don't know who you are, then how do you know what you're worth?
In these days when women are they're going to work, they are doing things which they actually like doing, they are following their dreams, their passion, aspiration. How do you think this pans out? What is that little, the secret ingredient rather, which makes you empowered or makes you feel self-worth?
I'm a grandmother. My son and daughter-in-law are 28, and I have a daughter who's 24. Now, the difference between the way I was brought up and a lot of women in my generation were brought up, and the difference between how we women have brought up our children is very stark. We are the gap, the bridge between a life that does not exist anymore and the future. And I think a lot of us, we need to be commended for it because we only knew a particular way of life. Our mothers told us, your worth lies in being good domestically. Even if you went to work, it was to support your family, not to fulfill yourself, what you needed to do creatively, financially, whatever it was. I think we recognized it was not enough for who we were and what we wanted to be. And a lot of us women have brought up the next generation to also look out for themselves, to love themselves and feel empowered, not to depend on another man or a woman or somebody else's financial help or emotional validation for their own sense of self-worth. My mother brought me up the way that worked for her, and she thought that would work for me. I entered into a very, very different kind of life. So the only way I knew to be was very different from the way that I needed to be. Somebody tells us this is how you're supposed to be, and you believe it, and you grow up that way because they tell you that with love. They don't tell you that to punish you.
Correct, correct.
And you see that it has worked for them. And you see it has worked for the generations before them. And you believe that, yes, this is a life that will work for me. And then suddenly you find that maybe with technology, maybe with globalization, maybe with the disintegration of joint families, people stepping out of their little worlds into a wider world and having an awareness. The old doesn't work anymore. These are all new normals. And so we're lost. We don't know what to do, how to do things for ourselves. But I think a lot of us have been smart enough to realize that we need to teach our children to live in a world that has not worked just for us, but to work for them also. My mother taught me to survive in a world that worked for her. She didn't imagine that I could step into a world that was different. That is the difference.
With the kind of importance that family was given in those days as a support system, as a kind of a base camp from which you take off, that is probably the reason, and that is the pride of our country also, of the family structure, because of which they gave that kind of importance to the domestic situation, and women were told to fall into that structure. Today, with women coming out of that comfort zone, coming into their own, how do you think this will impact the family? Because that is also a concern for many people.
Family is very, very important. I believe in that 100%. Personally, it is my safety net. And today, as much as I like to think I'm independent, I do things for myself, my courage comes from knowing that I have my family support. And in no way am I saying or will I ever say that you walk out disregarding family and do things for yourself. It's not individual at the cost of family. Now, having said that, earlier, the burden of holding a family together was on the woman's shoulders. The man had the job of earning the living. Today, the burden of holding on a family together is a woman's as much as it is a man's to hold it together. That's the only way it'll work. And I think that's what we are seeing also, giving my own children as an example. My son, it's wrong to say he helps with the home. It is his home. Right. He works around the home just as his wife works around the home. And both of them work outside. Nobody helps in housework or baby work. It is theirs. And they recognize that it is theirs. And they take equal part, sometimes greater, sometimes lesser, and they do it. That is the difference now, where men and women are starting to realize that it is both their responsibilities. And it's hard for the men, trust me, because the women have been traditionally taught to run the family, to look after the family. And now they've also been taught to be empowered. The men have not been taught about this family thing. And so they're struggling to learn, struggling to cope up. They will manage it beautifully. I know, because I can see that happening everywhere in the 20-somethings. Women being more financially empowered are not willing to put up with the kind of nonsense that they put up earlier. And when there is that respect that you are together as part of a union because you want to be, not because we're in the situation, it's not like that. Then there is respect, because both recognize what the other person brings to making this a beautiful relationship.
Now, can you point out those moments in the actions of the character touched you and moved you?
There was a very stark contrast in two characters in the movie. There was one of Sridevi, Sashi, and there was the other one of her sister. Both went to that same Marathi medium school. Both were brought up in the same way. One stayed in that box that she was put into, the box of tradition where, certain things were valued, other things were not valued. She was not encouraged to blossom as an individual. And it's not just about learning how to speak English, because you go to another place, you go to another city, another town, you learn the language. But as a person, was successful. She was fulfilled. She was happy. She had been encouraged by her daughters, by her husband, to blossom into being much more than she came into the relationship being. And she was encouraged to blossom into fulfilling her potential.
சரஸ்வதி வித்யாலயா ஞாபகம் இருக்கு. ஒரு வார்த்தை இங்கிலீஷ் தெரியாது நமக்கு. இப்ப பாரு, அமெரிக்கால இவ்வளவு பெரிய வேலை பண்ற, 2 பொண்ணுங்களை தனியா படிக்க வச்சிருக்கு. கிரேட் மன்னா.
அனில் அவன் மட்டும் எனக்கு தைரியம் கொடுக்கலன்னா சசி, நான் அப்படியே தான் இருந்திருப்பேன்.
I think this was a point that a lot of women identified with, saying, if only I could have had somebody who supported me like that, maybe I would have been different, my life would have been different. And that sense creates a deep loss and regret. But you know, you don't need to be stuck at that point. If you're aware of that and you also realize that, okay, it didn't happen, is there something I can do for myself to put myself in a better place, in a better situation, which is what Sridevi did for herself. That impulse of looking at that signboard and saying, I'm going to get tuitions. I'm not going to stay in this situation forever. I am going to take control and make my life better. That is a difficult place for a lot of people, but it made a difference. See, but again, Raji, if you notice, she did that secretly. She was not confident enough to let anybody know till her niece found out about it. Younger people are so encouraging. Today, if I'm able to tell my stories, and some of them are controversial, bold stories.
My mother, she was always decently dressed. Decently dressed. Okay. And she says, anyway, why would you want to dress like a village woman?
And it's because my kids say, Ma, go and do what you have to do. You have to be true to your creative impulse. So a lot of time, younger people help us to be what older people cannot.
Don't give up now. Just 3-4 classes தான் இருக்கு.
In the movie, the daughter is a little condemning of the mother. What is it about the closest people to you that they don't sometimes recognize or give you that leeway to be who you are?
Between the age where children think we are the heroes or gods and we can do no wrong, till they come back to the point where they realize that their parents are not so bad at all. There are many, many years where children have no respect, no regard for their parents at all. Because they're so focused on going forward that they can't see the good in their parents. Because there's a difference, there's a generational gap. It is normal, it always happens. In the movie, the grandmother says that, no?
இந்த வயசுல அம்மா அப்பாவை எல்லா குழந்தைகளும் அவமானமா தான் நினைப்பாங்க.
I remember saying very mean and hurtful things to my mother. See, again, these are social constructs. We think being worthy means you be posh, your hair is a particular way, you speak a particular way, you dress a particular way, and you're very impressionable as children. And you want your family to fit in those norms. You don't see the goodness in the difference. I went to a fairly posh boarding school where everybody spoke English, they were all urban, NRI kids and all of that. And I come from a village. When I say a village, I mean a 2-street village, okay, where my parents still live. I didn't consider that lifestyle to have any worth at all. My mother couldn't speak English. You know, I used to cringe a little bit when she came in and the boarding mistress was speaking in English and my mom was stumbling along and she was dressed in a sari while somebody else was dressed very fashionably. You know, she was wearing traditional jewelry while somebody else was wearing, posh designers. To me, it was like, oh my God, I wish my mother was different. And I've even said it to her. I never realized how hurtful it was. It's advertising, it's media, it's marketing that tells us this is the way to be, this is the life to aspire to. And it takes a while for children to realize that, yeah, my mother did know something after all. She was not as bad as I thought. Also, yeah, those who are closest to us take us for granted. It's very normal. And I don't think one should really pay that much attention, even though I tend to blow my horn a bit saying, hey, you're my kids. You don't see me for what I am. I'm much better than what you think I am. And it becomes a laughing point.
Within the scope of the movie, can you point out those little moments, those turning points which mattered?
The movie starts with her reading a paper, a newspaper, and her husband comes in and says, Shashi, chai?
Shashi, tea kudu seekram.
And she drops the paper and she goes immediately to make him chai. The same situation plays out a little later when she's in the US. By this time, she's already grown as a person a little bit, as a slightly stronger, independent person, used to finding her feet in a strange situation. She's reading an English newspaper and her husband comes in.
Shashi, tea kudu seekram.
Look in her eye that says, really? So you think you can just come in and take this from me? But she still gives in and she goes and makes a chai. These are small moments. Subconsciously, she realizes that she's growing and changing as a person. It's a moment of transition. She can either say, go make your own tea, or she can hand the paper and say, I'll make it. She chooses to hand the paper and go make the tea. But she doesn't go like the old Sashi. She is a new Sashi who recognizes what is being done to her, And that pause and that look is her own reinforcement that no, this is not okay. There's subconscious, subtle moments that decide how she is going to take the next step forward and the next step forward, what she'll put up with, and where she'll draw the line and say, Bus, I'm not going to put up with anymore. The realization that she's being taken for granted, it comes to her only when she is in a situation where other people praise her.
Making snacks, laddu.
We have an entrepreneur in the class.
At home, her husband says Sashi was born to make laddus. Now, there are two ways you can do this. You can say Sashi's laddus are the best in the world. She was born to make laddus, and you can make it seem like this is the best. And you can laugh and say she was born to make laddus and put her down for that, which is what her husband does.
These are the best laddus you will ever eat.
I totally agree.
And my wife, she was born to make laddus. I swear. अरे मैं तारीफ कर रहा हूँ बाबा, तुम लड्डू बनाने के लिए पैदा हुई हो नहीं?
The tone, the being taken for granted, this is not what she's going to put up with anymore. She realizes the difference only because now somebody else is praising her and showing how good she is.
You cooking with love, good food. You make people happy. You artist. Not small, not small.
And I think being appreciated for who you are helps you to recognize when you're being put down, when you're being treated in a condescending manner. And then you stand up for yourself. And then you say, no, enough.
World is changing very fast. We have a problem of, say, the digital age coming on to us. So we are always trying to catch up with our kids and probably on the back foot a lot of the time. Do you think then that the perception of empowerment, of finding your own space, of self-worth is always just that little bit, you're running to catch up with it?
Yes, it's very true. The only difference was earlier, without social media and this digital age being around, the gap was not as much.
Right.
We were moving forward, but fairly slowly. And now the whole life and lifestyle is changing so fast. Today, I have lived life. I have a certain sense of self-worth, which allows me to, stand straight and say, this is who I am. I know what I'm worth. For younger people who are still finding themselves, it's very, very hard. And I think a lot of the responsibility for keeping them somewhat stable lies in our hands to not mollycoddle them and pamper them so that they don't know how to survive, but to teach them that they are worthy and their sense of self-worth has to come from within them. And we have to give it to them so that it equips them to face with all those uncertainties that are out there in front of them. If they're coping as well as they do, I think a lot of the credit also goes to our generation for making it that way. My Samandhi had come home some time ago with her daughter, and her daughter was like, oh, Ma, you're like this, you're traditional, you're this, you're that. And I looked at her and said, yeah, she is that, I am that. And do you realize that you are what you are today because we have made you what you are today?
Well said. Can you name that aspect of character needed to transition into a situation of self-worth?
One is to be faced with a situation that is so bad, it shakes you up and makes you think, I don't want to be like this anymore. Because as long as you're comfortable and you think, it's fine, I'm fine, nothing will change. The other thing is to have someone in your life who believes in you and supports you. Like Sridevi had in her classmates and the Frenchman in particular.
Tell us what you like about the class.
Shashi?
We all need that one person or two people to believe in us, to support us, because in our journey to become something else, in our transformation, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to stumble, we're going to have self-doubt, we're going to fall. It makes a huge world of difference to have somebody around who says, you know what, it's okay, I'm here. If you need a hand, reach out and I will help you. I couldn't have been what I was today without that. For me, it is a friend of mine called Prasanna. I've always admired her. She got married very young. She grew up and she still remains today in an extremely patriarchal situation. And because of various family struggles, even being married so young, not having a great education, she just went in and took over the family business, which is a very male dominated business, and dealt with everything, becoming tough, but not hard. There's a difference. But if you become hard, if you lose your softness, your gentleness, then you become a not very nice person. But she managed that, and she still continues to manage that so beautifully. She's always been there to guide me when I was stumbling, to say, it's okay, I'm there, I'll be with you, to give you that moral support that says, see, you are worth what you are doing. Don't be afraid. For example, even last week, I've just told the story called I was 46, he was 28. That's the name of the story. And it's come out on Taper Tale. It's on their YouTube channel. And I hesitated a lot before I wrote the story and told it out to the public, because I knew that it's somewhat scandalous and people will look at me and wonder and judge me for it. It was his kindness that got me. The kindness in his eyes and his words and his smile, that I couldn't resist any more than I could have asked the earth to stop spinning for just one moment so I could catch my breath. Prasanna and I got talking and she said, see, you're not happy, obviously, with the ordinary and the normal. You've chosen to do things that satisfy you creatively. So why are you now afraid of what somebody will say? Because somebody will always say something. If you think this is something that is part of your creative journey, you should go out boldly and do what you're doing. And if people believe that your stories are real, it just means that you're a bloody good storyteller and that you're believable. So believe in yourself. I think I needed that. And she's always been there for me to help me in this, to pick me up when I stumbled, to give me a kick in the butt when I needed it. We underestimate the value of friends and of support. I think we should nurture our friendships and nurture strong relationships. That's really, really important, which helps us also to recognize ourselves as worthy people, as people with potential. I think this makes a huge difference in us being strong people and being strugglers.
Can you name that aspect of character which makes her who she is?
Is it simply that she is so generous? Or is it simply because she has a sense of duty that says, this is what has to be done and I'm going to do it? Is it a combination of her upbringing, of the loving background that she grew up in? It's all of these that make you who you are.
Very nicely said. Thank you very much, Mahitha. I think you've really made a good statement for women's empowerment, women to find their own self-worth. Thank you very much. It was lovely having you on the show.
Thank you so much for asking me to be on your show.
That was Mahitha for you on Real and Real Characters. This week's movie question is coming up. She is a devoted wife and mother, but her husband and daughter do not have a high opinion about her because they consider her too mundane. When they leave her and go abroad for his work, she is devastated but finds her own strength and self-esteem when she figures out an innovative way to cater to a market need, which even wins her the President's Award. What is the name of the original movie? When did she faint and fall? What was the innovative business she started? You can send your answers to the WhatsApp or email given here. The answers to the previous episode's questions are: which movie is this? Answer: Dil Chahta Hai. Who play the three friends? Answer: Amir Khan, Saif Ali Khan and Akshay Khanna. Who plays the older woman who one of them falls in love with? Answer: Dimple Kapadia. If you like this program, please click the like button, share, comment and subscribe to the show.